This is Mutabaruka. We want to present to you a wholesome kind of level of consciousness right now. So subscribe and tell your friend them. This is Mutabaruka.
Christian bishops now have real power, backed up by the state, and they use Satan to help them keep it. Again and again, church leaders claim that those who disagree with them, especially other Christian groups, are working for the devil.
As Constantine made it the state religion and the state church and an established religion, what Constantine and his immediate successors found hardest to put up with was heresy.
Catholic theologians would have said that because heretics didn't believe the correct Catholic faith, they must be worshipping the evil one instead, God's enemy.
The logic is relentless. It's us and them. If you're not with the church and the empire, you're with Satan.
You are listening to the Black Radar YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button and keep listening.
It's a short step for the church to demand that heretics be put to death. The first executions come 450 years after Christ. Over the following centuries, the numbers of people killed for supposedly working for Satan grows to many tens, possibly hundreds of thousands. Under the protection of the Roman Empire, the Christian religion grows quickly. But the bishops worry that the pagan gods are far too popular. Thousands of Romans still pray to the winged goddess Fortuna, the bringer of luck. But the most popular pagan god of all is Pan. Christian leaders see him as a serious threat who must be discredited.
Let's think of the case of Pan and in Arcadia, and he becomes a sort of demon, whereas he was actually a very benign god of music and happiness and lovemaking and altogether to be admired, but becomes a goat-legged demon, a satire, in the later Christianized versions of it.
Satan now adopts Pan's best-known features. He becomes an ugly, leering beast with horns on his head. His body is hairy, and he has Pan's cloven hooves, although sometimes he keeps the taloned feet of the ancient dragon. So outlandish has he become that he often has a second face on his belly. One of the greatest thinkers of the early Christian church is St. Augustine. Augustine is keen to show that the old nature gods are dangerous demons. According to Augustine, male demons called incubi appear to women at night and seduce them. Even more disturbing for Augustine, saintly men could be visited in their beds by female demons called succubi and forced to do sinful things against their will.
When, during the long dark hours, their frustrated minds produced all sorts of sexual visions and erotic pictures, and they had to expel these from their minds. And well, how on earth could this have come into my pious, celibate mind? It isn't me. This is an entity. This is something downright evil.
Okay, we're going to continue this.
Middle Ages, after 1,000 years of Christian teaching, the church has persuaded its followers that the devil and his demons are real, and that Satan is a powerful enemy. The problem is that some Christians take the idea a lot further than the bishops want.
Some branches of Christianity did see the world itself as created not so much by Satan but by a lesser evil god, and so for them, of course, everything to do with the world, with matter, with human flesh was seen in negative terms.
We do find the emergence of something called Gnosticism. Gnostic Christians carried with them this very clear notion of a good God and a bad God.
There's the good God who created everything spiritual, and there's the evil God who created everything physical, which means that everything that you can see or touch or sense with any of the five senses is actually coming from the evil God.
One group which is taking enthusiastically to the Gnostic idea of good and evil is the Cathars of southern France. To the Cathars, all material possessions are evil and belong to the devil. For a church now wealthy and powerful, this is an uncomfortable, even dangerous teaching.
The common people loved and admired them, called them les bonhommes, because they were healers. When the Cathars went around doing good, as they most certainly did, feeding the poor and healing the sick, so they were teaching people to avoid marriage, to avoid procreation, because all you will do if you have a family is to bring that new child into this decadent, evil, physical world where we should all be concentrating on spirituality.
If you were Catharist, then you were actually in league with Satan.
Pope Innocent III announced a crusade against the Cathars. He tried to convert them back to Catholicism. That hadn't worked. The only thing he could do now was kill them.
The crusade against the Cathars, launched in 1209, turns into a brutal 45-year war. At least 100,000 people die, partly for saying that Satan is even more powerful than the Church says he is. The crusade against the Cathars is against fellow Christians, but for almost 2 centuries, the Crusades are mostly about fighting Islam for control of the Middle East. In medieval Europe, Islam is seen as a heresy, the work of the devil. Muslims too are quick to claim their enemies are in league with the evil one. In the Quran, Muslims are instructed to fight against non-Muslims because they are friends of Satan. Both sides, inheriting the ancient beliefs of the Persians, see the world as divided into good and evil, justifying all the horrors of war and conquest. The Crusades leave a sinister legacy. In the middle of the campaign, Pope Gregory IX founds the Inquisition. Controlled by the Dominican Order of Friars, the Inquisition's job is to find heretics and hand them over to local princes for punishment.
The Inquisition gave people plenty to be frightened of. It gave them the fires of hell to be frightened of, and it gave them, in a more immediate sense, the Inquisition itself.
They had the right to arrest that person without telling them who'd accused them, or indeed what they were accused of.
The accused are guilty until found innocent, and can be held for as long as the authorities want. Anyone who questions the Inquisition is immediately suspected of being in league with the devil. In the fight against Satan and the powers of evil, medieval rulers believed that, as in any war, information is vital. Up till now, the Church has not officially allowed Christians to be tortured, although torturing Jews and Muslims is acceptable. But in May 1252, Pope Innocent IV rules that Christians suspected of heresy can be tortured until they confess they are working for the devil and inform on co-conspirators.
Once you've set up a debate that defines somebody as a Satanist, as a servant of Satan, then you have put them in a position where you can do what you want to them because you are justified by working for the forces of good.
Generally, once somebody had been accused of heresy, there was no way they could clear themselves. No matter what they said, because they were a heretic, therefore in league with the devil, therefore anything they said was like to be a lie.
But the torturers can't do whatever they please. They are supposed to follow strict guidelines.
In theory, and according to Pope Innocent IV in the middle of the 13th century, torture should be limited, it should not draw blood, it should not lead to serious permanent damage to the person who's being tortured. In practice, these regulations are not always followed.
But there's also something which the psychologists would refer to as a rationalization process, that it could all be very well for them to say, oh yes, we are trying to save your immortal soul, we're trying to keep you out of hell, we're trying to prevent the devil from getting you, and what they really mean is we'd rather fancy your farm.
All over Europe, the new powers, supposed to be used against Satan, are used by the unscrupulous to seize wealth or to do down their enemies. In 1307, King Philip the Fair of France brings witchcraft charges against the leaders of the Knights Templar, the fabulously wealthy order of Crusaders. Philip accuses the Templars of worshipping a pagan idol called Baphomet, a supposedly satanic figure.
The Templars have been involved in the Middle East in negotiations with Muslims, and some people in Western Europe thought they had been in league with the Muslims, and because the Muslims, everybody knew, in inverted commas, were involved in magic, there is therefore a hint that perhaps the Templars were involved in magic too.
They were attacked and largely destroyed on Friday the 13th of October in 1307, sealed orders given by Philip le Bel to his seneschals to attack every Templar stronghold simultaneously.
Ever since the purge of the Templars, Friday the 13th has been seen as an unlucky day, somehow connected with satanic forces. In 1320, the war against Satan is wound up another notch. Pope John XXII orders the Inquisition to target any kind of witchcraft, sorcery, or necromancy. A big worry is that unscrupulous priests who know how to drive out devils with the rites of exorcism might instead use exorcism to invite the devil in.
Formulas, Latin formulas and rituals which can be used to command the demon. Now, once you've got a Latin formula that has power to command a demon, I could use that to command a demon to do my washing up, you know? I could use that power to command a demon to get this woman I fancy into bed. The necromancers are interested in using the formulae of exorcism to command demons to do other things that they are interested in. You know, a demon could make me rich. A demon could find some hidden treasure for me.
Fear that necromancers and witches are all around, conjuring up demons and making pacts with the devil, sweeps across Europe. One of the first cases investigated by the Inquisition is in the Irish city of Kilkenny. In 1324, in a dispute over inheritance, one of the richest women in the town, Dame Alice Catala, is accused of witchcraft, heresy, and of having a demon lover called Robin.
Alice Catala, a landowner in Kilkenny who had several husbands, so her stepchildren brought a charge against her that she poisoned her previous husbands in order to obtain the land. And she poisoned or killed them otherwise through witchcraft. Alice
manages to escape to England. Her unfortunate servant, Petronella, is tortured and burned at the stake. The campaign against necromancers, sorcerers, and witches lasts 300 years and kills between 60,000 and 300,000 people. The vast majority of the victims are women.
Women were thought of as being more prone to the devil, more likely to sin, more likely to be led astray. They were also thought to be less intellectual than men.
Women were seen as closer to animals. And part of this was that they were more susceptible to temptation, that they were more easily seduced by material gratification.
As the Inquisition goes about its grisly business, rounding up suspects and interrogating them, many clerics and lay people worry that it's all guesswork. Perhaps they're missing even more witches than they're finding. But how can you tell who is one of Satan's helpers? What you need is a standard test. In 1486, 2 German Dominican monks publish a textbook for inquisitors called Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. The book contains a clever catch-22. Not only is witchcraft heresy, not believing in witches is heresy as well.
The Malleus Maleficarum was the manual, the how to get rid of all these demonic fleas that had infested a human being.
It was a book of what witches were, what witches did.
Malleus Maleficarum tells the inquisitor everything he needs to know. Witches have the mark of Satan on their bodies, a birthmark or a wart. They can fly by rubbing magical herbs on their skin, and they gather at Satan-worshipping ceremonies called Sabbaths. At these, they celebrate a twisted version of the Christian Mass, kissing the devil's rear end in a blasphemous act of homage.
Certainly there was a fear at that time, which was why Malleus Maleficarum sold so many copies and ran through so many editions and is still in print. "30 years after Malleus Maleficarum was written, Martin Luther leads the Protestant Reformation, splitting the Christian Church in 2. Each faction, Protestant and Catholic, claims the other is in league with the evil one. Both sides use Malleus Maleficarum to find Satanists, and not just in order to destroy them. Witch hunting is a kind of scientific quest. The idea is, if you can understand witches and the devil, you can fight them.
The whole business of witch hunting is almost a sort of intellectual research project. I need to gather a bit more data about, what demons do. So I'm going to interrogate a few more witches to get a bit more data, and then I'm going to write it up in my book. The cutting edge of scientific inquiry.
Right across Europe, hysteria about Satan sweeps Protestant and Catholic countries alike. In Scotland, James VI, one of the best educated kings in Europe, is so caught up in the craze, he writes a book about the devil and witchcraft. Called Demonology, James' book sets out to prove that Satan-worshipping witches are everywhere, and that they are the gravest threat to the security of the state.
He surrounded himself with advisors, and mainly religious advisors, who would protect him from the demons that he feared so much. He saw it everywhere.
Well, James was certainly quite militant about this. He thought he was fighting a war.
Even as James leads the fight against the devil and the forces of evil, the devil is helping James to keep his crown. James can always point to the figure of Satan and say, if it weren't for me, look who would be ruling in my place.
Although this is quite frightening, it's also in a way quite gratifying for James. One of the witches who was interrogated was asked, why is the devil attacking our king? And the witch who was confessing allegedly answered, this is what was recorded anyway in her confession, the devil is doing this because King James is the greatest enemy that the devil has in the world.
When the New World of the Americas is colonized by Europeans, the devil travels with them. The Puritan colonists who arrived from England in the late 1600s are strong believers in the power of Satan. They're convinced that everyone who isn't a Puritan is controlled by the devil, and that women are especially susceptible to Satan's powers.
They had established what might be called Puritan communities, and were looking to build a great example for the rest of Christendom.
if you were enjoying yourself, or if a group of you were singing or dancing or having a drink, then those who were opposed to that kind of fun were quite certain that Satan was filling the glasses for you.
In 1688 in Boston, an Irish laundrywoman called Mary Glover is accused of bewitching the children of one of her customers. Proof of her pact with the devil includes several rag dolls found in her house.
Mary Glover was Irish and a servant. Her first language was Gaelic, and one of the tests to prove that you weren't a witch was to speak the Lord's Prayer. The linguistic difficulties meant that she couldn't speak the Lord's Prayer without, as they saw it, blaspheming. She was hanged as a witch in 1688.
The informative information presented in this video is motivational and is positively aimed at inspiring, educating and entertaining the viewers with the cutting edge of critical reasoning. If you enjoy the contents on the Black Radar YouTube channel, please consider subscribing to show your support.